Today, folks, I am going to be speaking to you about what is a very current problem that is stressing an awful lot of people. Of course, it's COVID-19. My name is Bill Campbell, and I'll give a little background, but this presentation concerns what is happening in this world right today and how we can counter some of the effects of it. So this video today could make a difference, honestly, between people either not contacting this or surviving it much better if they do. And it's going to depend an awful lot on how we look at this and how we handle this. Just personally, my background is I've been involved in the education and training field for over 65 years. I'm still a psychotherapist working at a Charlottetown and Summerside under the name of Abigood Associates. And I've been trained in probably more than a dozen colleges and universities across North America and have had numerous training sessions on top of that. All of that is not an ego stance, just to let you know that the basis of this presentation comes from a lot of training, a lot of life experiences. Now, this is why the answers to this question: is COVID-19 a gift or a curse? And the answers could very well make the difference between life and death for many people. Now, as we're starting, I'm going to give, that was part of an introduction, I'm going to discuss healthcare models, understanding mental health, the benefits of COVID-19, and positive health choices that we can all make to increase our immune system and our defense system against even contracting either COVID-19 or other viruses or similar illnesses. Now, as I move over here to this side, I'm going to look at these in stages. I'm going to look at our healthcare models. And our healthcare models are basically two. Now, the predominant model in healthcare has been what we call the medical model. It involves testing, it involves diagnosing, it involves x-rays, tests, doing swabs they're doing for COVID-19. Mostly going to treatment, which include medications, which a lot include brain chemicals when we're referring to some of our mental illnesses, surgery, physical interventions, and this has been the process that we have always used in regards to healthcare. Today, that system is under some amount of duress because we have a disease that we don't know an awful lot about yet, and we don't have a cure for it, we don't have an immunization, we don't have a vaccine. Now, our scientists and doctors are working on this, and eventually we will produce this. But, as has been well known, this is going to be around for a while. It's going to come back, and it probably come back with mutating into some other similar diseases, as has been our history. So our medical model, to some extent, has been compromised right now and is struggling to try to catch up. Now, the other model of health is called the public health model. Now, that model involves more non-invasive type of treatments, like counseling, psychology, psychotherapy, but involve a number of other areas like acupuncture, massage, physiotherapy, even though physio can fit into the medical model too. But there are a number of non-invasive treatments today which can work on the health model. And these things, such as herbs, cannabis at the moment has been being used in a number of ways, and we're still doing research on that one. But physical activity, healthy eating, treatment for addictions, all fall under what we would know as the public health model. Now, the issue today is, of course, the relationship between the two. Now, as a psychologist in Maine has recently stated, the mental health model or the public health model has always been sort of considered the stepchild in the health system. It hasn't received as much attention, probably because in many cases it's not as funded by the drug companies because unless we're looking at brain chemical production, a lot of these treatments are non-invasive and there's not as much money to be made on these. So for various reasons, they have, this has lagged behind. But today, with where we are now, this one is becoming probably very higher on the totem pole of consideration against just a simple medical model. So a relationship, which I will talk about, is sort of the relationship between psychology and physiology, or the relationship between how we think, how we feel, how we act, and our physical health. So that's the two areas of the healthcare models that I'm addressing, particularly this one. And so, moving on to the explanation, which is on part B, or number 2 is understanding mental health, or number 3 over there, understanding mental health. I'd like to explain to you a lot about how our mental health works and how it relates to our physical health. I myself am a recovered alcoholic of getting close to 40 years and have worked around this field of addiction and mental health for well over 40 years. And in early parts of recovery, I was suggested I read a book published by Hazelton out of New York, the name of which is My Mind is Out to Get Me. Now, the idea behind that is, of course, what is the influence of our minds on a lot of recovery and other things in terms of health. Now, it wasn't so much what was in that book that intrigued me, it was the name of it. And it got me to do research, because I am a fact person. I like to investigate and understand how things work. So, following that up, I did training in Halifax right after CFB Summerside closed here, and I was working with the Community Futures program, and the mayor, Basil Stewart, myself, and a couple of other people in his admin were in Halifax doing training with a guy by the name of Dave Greger out of Saskatchewan. And we had a lot of similar background. I had some time to be able to talk to him privately. And I asked him, David, how does your brain work? And he drew this. He drew it on a napkin. He said, your brain talks to you at a rate of 400 to 600 words per minute. To put that in perspective, that means about 5 times faster than we normally talk. Your brain sends ideas to you. But the part that's intriguing about that is that what goes through your brain, 70% of it is negative if you do well. So when you're at your best in far as your mental health goes, 70% of what goes through your brain is negative. In other words, for every positive thought you have, the natural brain activity is 2 times as many negatives. Could be as simple as buying a pair of shoes and saying, I don't have enough money and it's too early in the year and the selection isn't very good. There's 3 reasons. So it doesn't have to be the world is falling apart. But today that can be more applicable. Because if you don't take control of your brain, your negative thinking when under stress and under a number of difficult circumstances, the negativity of 2 to 1 negative can very quickly jump to 10 to 1 negative, as is happening today with a lot of people predicting doom and gloom around COVID-19. Now, another individual, Eckhart Tolle, however you pronounce his name, advised to read something on him. Oprah, by the way, had him on and do interviews with him. I have his books, The Power of Now and The New Earth, very popular #1 sellers. In his book, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle states 80 to 90% of most people, and I emphasize most people's brains, are negative, addictive, repetitive, draining, dysfunctional, and dangerous. 80 to 90%. Most of us think that way. And if you go track it right back to Sigmund Freud, the creator of psychology, you would find the same thing. Now you question why. It's a form of self-protection, preparing us for the worst situation so that we're not disappointed when things happen. The problem with that is that we can interfere with our own recovery by preparing in a negative way. And that's what I'm going about to show you. Now, is there any hope for this with all this negativity? Well, a guy by the name of William Glasser, whose training I am certified in, I've been with him. He's been on Prince Edward Island at least 3 times with the Counseling Association, Holland College, and the Teachers Federation. And I've been with him and certified in his training. I've spent a fair amount of time with him. He has since passed away. But one of the models he got into was he referred to total behavior. Now, he tried to simplify this in a way that we could all understand it, even children as young as 6 or 7 years of age. And he describes our behavior system in terms of a car. This might not look like a car, but the 4 circles indicate the 4 wheels. This indicates a front-wheel drive car. And the 4 behavior systems in there are how we think, how we act, how we feel emotionally, and our physiology, our physical health. Now, for many of us, we all were brought up in, depending on what time period you were brought up in, understanding how our thinking and acting affects our feeling. That has been around for a long time. This 4th category of physiology is relatively new to many. In the last 20 plus years, we're coming to understand the relationship between physiology and our cognitive thinking. We're understanding how they affect one another. But that is more recent, except William Glasser wrote about that in 1965 in his first book, known as Reality Therapy, now called Choice Theory. He wrote about that in 1965, about how this whole thing works. Now, what's interesting about this is that the direct control we have over our physiology, which we're finding out very clearly now with COVID-19, is very limited. And we do not have, so what do? We go to doctors, we go to professionals who are looking to isolate, medicate, treat with whatever treatments we have to be able to deal with this. And we rely on our physical health, our medical model for this. But at present, our medical model is not really meeting our needs because we don't have, as said, vaccines or preparations for this. Now, on the emotional side of things, which is about to go through the roof, as most of us know, the mental aspects of what we're dealing with, the anxiety, the depression, the paranoia, the fear, the anger, the mental illness accents that are coming because people are allowing their brains to take over in a negative way, are reaching heights that probably haven't been reached for quite some time. So this is the one that is causing us as many problems maybe as this one, and is about to cause more. So where do we go when we have this problem? Well, we go to doctors quite often who will give you brain chemicals, but a lot of them will refer you to therapy, the mental health area that I'm in. But we only have a minimum of 15%, which is relative term, but meaning we have very limited control of what goes on in our brain. Most of us know that. We know that we seem to have very little ability to be able to control this. And people tell you things like, don't worry about it, don't be upset about it, don't be angry, don't be frustrated, none of which ever worked, is working, or will ever work in that way. Telling you to just be happy is not enough. Before the end of this presentation, I'm going to tell you how you do that. I'm going to give you the how to control this, not just what to do. This is now where many of our problems come from. But the front part of this car is the control pattern. These are the feeds. Our feelings and our physiology tell our brain, our hypothalamus, that there is problems. And your body and your brain are meant to self-correct. The eye, like the pupil, is narrow when there's too much light, and it expands when there's too little light. Your pores open up when you're hot, close down when you're cold. Your sensitivities are all internally controlled. Our heartbeat, perspiring, energy levels, very much. So is your brain. Your brain is meant to protect you. But if you don't control how your brain works, you can activate an awful lot of negative thinking. Now, what William Glasser says is your thinking is 85% choice, and your acting is even more so, 95% choice. So here's our problems, physically and mentally. Here's our solutions, how we think and how we act. Now, if you're looking at this whole sheet, and you look at this book, My Mind's Out to Get Me, Dave Greger, 70% negative at best, Eckhart Tolle saying 8. These people are all saying how negative your brain is, right back to Freud. William Glasser is stating, hold it, your thinking is 85% choice, the key word here being choice. Now, if you put all these people together, and most of them I have been with, you will expect that there would be a big debate. These people on the negative side, this guy, Glasser, on the positive or choice side. But when you put them all together, you would not find a great deal of discrepancy. Because these guys and William Glasser would say, if you let your brain go on its own, if you give it free rein, the negative, addictive, negative thinking, dysfunctional, dangerous thinking will predominate. That's what will happen, and that's what's happening right now when you are hearing a lot of negativity and letting your brain take off. Here's what's happening. But he says 85% of that can be choice. So when we can learn how to think more positive, not only are we going to change how we feel, which is direct, but we're also going to change our physiology. Because it's well known and accepted that our health is very much, our physical health is very much dependent on our mental health. Stress can, if not cause disease, can certainly prevent your recovery from disease. It can affect your immune system. So we know that positive thinking in many ways increases our production of endorphins, encephalins, dopamine, serotonin, chemicals that both make you feel better and fight disease, like the endorphins. Now, if they are compromised by the stress coming from our negative thinking, those feelings will impinge the production of these chemicals by your brain, which increases your vulnerability and susceptibility to disease. So it's a direct link that our physical health is very much dependent on this. And since we don't have a vaccine created for this disease, we're looking at people that either get the disease, recover from the disease, or don't get the disease. The greatest asset they can have presently is a healthy immune system. And you talk about people being immunely vulnerable because of diseases or sickness like fibromyalgia or Crohn's or some of these diseases that are very much weaken your immune system. And how do we increase that immune system? And no one presently is really talking about how we can become healthier in a mental way, which can increase our production of brain chemicals to increase our immunity and give us defenses against even getting these diseases. And if at worst we get them, how we can recover. So the direct link, this is the survival mode, but it goes from our thinking indirectly through our feeling and how our brain works right to our physiology. Now, that is the crux of why this is so important, that we understand the input of our thinking and how we can change that. The process, of course, then goes to how do I change my thinking? We can understand why it's necessary, but how do I do that? And Some of this can come from looking at our some of the what I call the gifts of COVID-19. Now, many people might question that there's no gifts in that area, but let's look at the positives that have come from it. Let's look at this. We have, many ways, a united world. It's like an Armageddon. The whole world's on the same side, trying to defeat this disease. We've never before ever been as unified that way, even though we still are knowing there's political debate in many areas, and we know where they're coming from. In Canada, we have what we call real democratic and responsible government. By that, I mean the governing party with the opposition are all working together, giving limitations to the government, but supporting them as much as they can to take care of this. We have democratic and responsible government, which is not always the case in other places. So it was one time we can be appreciative of how our government leaders are operating. The importance of strong, confident leadership. Two people especially stand out for that. Dr. Heather Morrison, who is getting a lot of notoriety, is in charge of this. She is doing a wonderful job. She has got the confidence of the people. And that's so important for us to listen to, because people have confidence that she knows what she's doing and she's dedicated to her job. And that's so important. It's like the bedside manner of a doctor. Sometimes is every bit as important as his medical expertise, is what's his manner like. And in therapy, the relationship with your therapist is sometimes of paramount importance, more so than maybe the procedures that they try to work with. The other, Dr. Heather Kaiser, the head of the mental health, the head of psychiatry of the island, another competent individual who understands the mental processes that we're dealing with and being prepared for how can we deal with those around addictions, around mental health, which is coming secondary to this, but really ramping up, and we have to be on top of that. Some of the family interactions, communication, dependency, reliance on each other, the love we have, it's never probably been stronger, but it can also lead to conflict. So families pulling together has been one of the positives. We've accented food production and delivery, how important they are. How important, because we know when it comes down to survival, some of the more necessary things like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the bottom necessities of life become more important than the self-actualization things. So these service people, truckers, taxis, the mail people, police, first responders, we realize how significant they are, and we're appreciating these people, frontline people. The medical service professionals in the front lines that still have their family at home. I talked with a number of them and how they actually put in danger to some extent some of their own family and their own health to serve us. We at least are, I think, appreciating that. There's a big equalization of power. Who fits in the totem pole, higher or lower? And I'm not picking on these people in any regard, but the cashier versus the lawyer, which one is more important today? The trucker versus the accountant. And I'm not picking on lawyers and accountants. I'm just trying to look at the equalization of how important people are has narrowed tremendously over this because of this disease. The significance of the elderly and the homeless, giving them time and attention. How many of us with elderly parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, just didn't spend enough time going in to see them? Oh, they're there, we'll get in to see them sometime. We're too busy. And now you can't get in. And we realize that their health, and many of them, if they're vulnerable, could die with that. And they could die in a lot of degree lonely, except if our frontline nurses and all that are taking care of them. So all of a sudden, we're starting to pay attention, that we should have, but we're paying more attention to the fact that they're not always going to be there and we can't just always drop in. The appreciation of the telecommunications and computers. How many of us regretted our children, our youth, spending so much time on computers and internet and all of this and no family time? Now it's become our savior. Now it's become our communication methods that we didn't have before. Now our children are teaching us, just like who was sitting here with me today, two of my daughters, Casey and Buffy, and they're taping this for me. And both of them have had some problems with mental health, with post-traumatic stress, with phobias, and both are doing exceptionally well. But they are teaching me how to become more techie in terms of how to contact people, which otherwise I would not be able to do. This presentation being one way. The importance of education and training. Where would you have your doctors, your scientists, your therapists? Where would you have these people without education? It's not just something that you do and pay for to get money back. It's the survival of society is based on training and education. The importance of that has increased tremendously, that we need that. Gratitude, an appreciation for the freedoms we had. Did you ever appreciate travel? Did you go see anybody? Did you ever appreciate you could go out to eat? You could go to a social event, you could go to a theater, you could go to your beaches, you could go out, you could do anything, you could walk. Now the restrictions are there. Do we appreciate the simple things of life? Some of this, I think, needs to be addressed by government. On Prince Edward Island, if we cannot afford to close access to beaches and to people being outside. And I know that's not what they're trying to do. They're just trying to regulate it, but it becomes very important as we're headed to our summer season. Access to the water, to the beaches is going to be paramount to our mental health. So I'm sure our government will be more creative in how they're going to deal with that. The importance of friends and family. How important they are when it's taken away and you can't be with them. How important of a hug. I had a daughter standing there crying a few days ago that she couldn't hug her mother or father. Very significant. How important was that before? The importance of religious spiritual leaders. A friend of mine, Andrew Bryce, has talked to me about online services, how they're going through the roof, and many ministers are saying the same thing. Strangely enough, in dire times, we tend to look to some spiritual leadership and some contact with a significant being other than ourselves, and this seems to be one of the ways that is happening. So our religious leaders are becoming extremely important in how we deal with some of these issues of life. The importance of life. How important is it? Scott Peck, in Further Along the Road Less Traveled, in that book, stated the only thing that really makes life meaningful is that it's limited and that we're vulnerable. We can't accept the fact that life is eternal and that there's no limitations. This COVID-19 has certainly impressed on it the fact that our lives and our health are, we are vulnerable and life can be limited. So these are just some of the mental, physical aspects of a recovery. Now, the final stage. How can we make positive changes which can increase our mental capacity to cope with this, increase our production of endorphins, encephalins, dopamine, serotonin, which are going to elevate our immune system and make us more resistant to all forms of disease, not just for COVID-19. This is things we can do forever, and maybe the world is going to be altered where these things are going to be more instituted as part of our life. A statement says, crisis, the creator of change. Most of us don't change without crises. Now we're getting hit with a big one. So it's causing us to think about and look at adjustments to life. How can we increase our immune system? How can we make ourselves less susceptible to stress? Number one, comedy, music. Fun and laughter, and scientifically we have evidence of that increasing our production of chemicals to resist disease. Dr. Norman Cousins, on The Anatomy of an Illness, written back in the 80s, cured himself of a disease. He figured he used comedy as the number one thing. How important is comedy? extremely. We need to be able to laugh. It generates chemicals that we're not really sure of how, but studies have proven this, that this can make us healthier. Caring for or helping others. 12-step programs is an example. Reaching out, talking to people, just going over some of the things that can help you and help others. This is important. Some of the negatives to avoid. Avoid too much negative news reports. Listen enough to get the idea, but be careful about being overwhelmed by the negativity, especially if you have children around, because the unconscious motivation and the potential for maybe trauma down the road from this is huge. Only listen to enough, but do not inundate yourself with negativity. It affects you unconsciously. Watch for any negative behaviors, over drinking, drug use, overeating. Avoid communicating with overly negative people. You may need to spend some time, but don't listen to a lot of the negativity of people predicting doom and gloom. That's going to hurt your immune system. Time for pets and animals. All the time. Spend some time with them. That unconditional love. That can build your immune system and build your positivity. Home projects. But if you do these, break them up into manageable pieces called chunky. Don't take on major projects that are going to overwhelm you and you're just going to procrastinate and then get more negative because you're not doing it. Schedules. Sleep, chores, studying, eating. Try to keep as normal a schedule as possible. Family time, games, exercise, talking, movies, together. Outside activities, nature, if possible, still with the distancing. This is why I talked about the beaches and the water. We have to find a way to be able to get that into our system, especially as the season is coming on. And spiritual activity, reading, praying, online, some meditation. These are all positive things. We have in recovery an acronym called HALT, things to worry about. H-A-L-T, hunger, anger, lonely, and tired. Watch for those things. And as you look at all of these things, I have a principle. I say if I learn something new, I want to put it into action within 48 hours or it's just going to become useless knowledge. This is the same, folks. Do some of this. Understand how your health is dependent on your mental processes, and this is how you can improve your mental processes. We will get through this. We will survive. PEI, we're in the greatest spot in the world. This is going to be the first place that's probably going to recover. Now, in saying that, don't stop listening to Heather Morrison in doing the things that she's suggesting. We have to lock it down for a while. We have to continue doing what she's saying. But we have controlled access. We have the benefit of a small area, and the Maritimes in general. We're going to lead the country in recovery. But we need to, in the meantime, practice a lot of these things. This has been probably a little bit lengthy, folks, but the difference in the using of this and understanding it could save your life and your friends, your family, and maybe the bottom line, society itself. Thank you for your time.